Hello and welcome to this special edition of Suits and Boots, the TDI Sustainability podcast series, in conjunction with the Investing in African Mining Indaba. In this series, we discuss some of the key themes that will be covered at the 2026 Mining Indaba conference. I'm Assheton Stewart Carter, Executive Chair at TDI and Board Member and Chief Investment Officer at the Impact Facility. Today, we're joined by one of the winners of this year's Community Voices competition run by the Impact Facility and the Mining Indaba organisers. Nkosi Sibanda is a Zimbabwean researcher, community mobiliser, human rights defender, and regional lead of the Human Rights Measurement Initiative. And just to give you some idea of the scale of his accomplishments, the Human Rights Measurement Initiative, which Nkosi leads, works across 12 different African countries. As well as that, he's also the founder of the Centre for Environmental and Corporate Accountability Research, which is a youth-led community organisation leveraging geospatial and blockchain technologies to advance data-driven environmental and mineral governance advocacy. And this is reaching over 3,000 youths and women on participatory mineral governance. So we have in Nkosi a very experienced individual who has a great track record of mobilising communities to ensure more benefits for communities around mineral development. And this is a theme, and this award is very special to me because I founded the Impact Facility about 8 years ago with the specific purpose of investing into mining communities. And back in the day, I researched and wrote my PhD thesis on this project as well. And I worked for 12 years in NGOs promoting ways to drive economic development to mining communities, ensure that their rights were protected. So a big shout out to the Indaba and to the Impact Facility for this Community Voices Award, which I think is beginning now to recognise some of the most important community leaders around mineral development in Africa. So Nkosi, we've got some serious topics to talk about today, but first of all, perhaps we can hear a little bit about your journey. You wear a great many hats. You're a human rights defender, you're a community mobiliser, a published researcher, climate activist, award winner, regional leader for this vast human rights measurement initiative. You engage governments, you founded the Centre for Environmental Corporate Accountability and Research. Explain a little to our listeners about your significant story, I think I'd like to say. Tell us how it began and what got you to where you are now.
Thank you so much, Assheton, and thank you for having me. This is such an important conversation that we're having. And it looks like we're starting right from the beginning. So I come from a mining town, Hwange. Hwange is one of the major mining towns in Zimbabwe, and it has been a mining town for over 100 years. So the town itself, its existence, and its sustenance has always been anchored in the mining industry. So it's been a coal mining area since around 1906. So that is where I come from. So mining to me is not abstract. Mining has always been our daily lives. It has always been the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the land that we walk on. But growing up in such an environment, I always expected more from my community, because in school we were taught that minerals are meant to make our lives better, minerals are meant to develop us, and so forth. But growing up, I didn't see much of that, especially in my generation. There wasn't much of that. The infrastructure around me was dilapidated. The quality of education was below par. So that always got me wondering if really are minerals meant to uplift our lives, or to uplift lives of those that are involved in the mining business. So that has always been how I grew up, and seeing all this that was happening around me, it got me asking a lot of questions that I didn't have responses to. And that is what maybe shaped what I really studied in school. And that really shaped where I am right now. But if you look at everything that I do, I know that I wear so many hats. There's one thing that is central in that, or maybe rather two things. But one of the most important things is that I am being the change that I want to see in my community. So whenever I see a gap that needs me, I'm always ready to jump in and being the change that I want to see in my community. That has been central to my philosophy, that there's no one who's going to come and service and save my community except I do so. So I've always been involved in various community initiatives from really a young age until now, because to me, what is really key and central is that I need to be the change that I want to see in my community. And secondly, especially when I was a bit older, what really shaped what I do today, if you notice, there's a common denominator there as well. And that denominator is data-driven engagements, because I realize that sometimes we tend to get emotional about most of these things that we are facing in community. We tend to be very emotional about them. They are very emotional because they affect our day-to-day lives, but being emotional about them without providing data and credible evidence of their existence, I know that it might sound somehow upset that I need to prove that I'm suffering. I need to prove that the air is polluted. I need to prove that the water that I'm drinking has been polluted by mining companies. But that's how it is. If you do not find ways, to pursue data-driven engagements, you end up sounding like someone who's just making unnecessary noise. You end up sounding like someone who's pushing a certain agenda. So you realize that central to most of my work is pursuing data-driven engagements. In all that we do, there has to be data and evidence that drives the engagements that we are having. So that's what led to me founding my own research organization that I lead with other young people in Hwange. And we are using various, research tools to gather data that can drive policy conversations, that can drive decision-making conversations. At Human Rights Measurement Initiative, I'm also leading work that is really anchored around measuring.
There's a lot to unpack there, and I'm going to try and unpack some of those topics during our talk, especially on the data-driven. But I was very taken by be the change you want to be, because I hear there that you're taking responsibility for that change rather than waiting for it to happen to you, and that really kind of talks to your activist roots, I guess. You mentioned, that I guess your realization that things aren't as they should be came from your experience living or growing up in a mining town in Hwange, which I visited, by the way, probably back in 1995 or 1996 as part of my postdoc studies. Could you tell us a little bit about, kind of draw a picture for our listeners about what has happened in Hwange historically? I believe there was an influx of Chinese mining companies to the area at one stage. Did you see that they brought the jobs and the prosperity that you were hoping for? What is the situation now, and what were the community expecting?
Yeah, that's a very important question. And if you last visited Hwange in 1995, if you were to visit again, you'll be very shocked at how things have turned out to be. Because, of course, I wasn't born in that era, but there are a lot of illustrations, there are a lot of magazines that we grew up reading. And we're also wondering how things turned out to be how they were when we were growing up and how they are right now compared to the pre-independence and early independence years, the 80s and the 90s. Because back then, mining was run by Hwange Colliery Company, which was the major, or the mostly for most of the time, which was the only company that was mining in Hwange. And maybe due to how it was run from its days being, by the colonial government. But in the early 2000s, things took, a drastic change. The major company, the Hwange Colliery Company, started, going on a downward spiral. Things were getting out of control. There was rampant corruption. and nepotism and so on. So most of the things were starting to get run down. And unfortunately, those were the years when we're also growing up. After a while of things not really going as people were expecting, with the major mining company on a downward spiral, then began the talks of the Chinese coming in to invest. And for most of us, we thought that this might be an opportunity for our town to be restored to its former glory. For those that were older than us, they were telling us stories about how things were. But unfortunately, that was not the reality. When we hear about foreign investment, you always link it to development and improvements in quality of life. But now that I'm looking back, I actually think that we might have gotten the almost opposite of that. We are mostly experiencing severe environmental degradation and very, 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 very limited local benefit. We can take, for instance, jobs. When one of the major promises that were being sold to us as the community was that we are going to get jobs. We are going to see most young people being absorbed into the workforce. That's a message of hope, especially in a country where unemployment is very high and quality of life is low. People are living, 60% of the population is living below the poverty datum line. So that was a promise of hope, a message of hope that young people are going to be absorbed into the labor force. We are going to see a lot of Chinese mining companies coming in to mine and to process coal. Yes, the jobs were there, but they were not the kind of quality jobs that most of us hoped for, because even unto this day, most of the locals are hired only as manual laborers and mostly on a casual basis. Most of them are doing skilled work, but they are being paid as general laborers. Mining has really turned to a curse for our communities. Our roads are in a worse state than they were maybe probably 10 to 15 years ago, before the influx of Chinese mining companies. The air pollution it's just in a state that we cannot even comprehend. Most of our water bodies are polluted, and Hwange yet a unique setup, because apart from people working in mines, most people survived in agriculture, and those have been impacted because those agricultural activities carried the community through most of the hard years when the major mining company was on a downward spiral. So most people's livelihoods were really anchored on those agricultural activities. But now, with most of the water bodies polluted, those activities are no longer as productive as they were. So those are some of the impacts, or those are some of the benefits that we have managed to reap as a community, as compared to what we'd really hoped for. And it's really sad and unfortunate. At some point, actually not at some point, right now, mining is even happening closer to residential areas. Mining is happening closer to even schools. There's an active mine right now that is only a stone throw away from a primary school. And at some point, learners were being asked to leave the school during learning hours to go home to allow the company to carry out its blasting exercises, which I believe that it is so much unfair, especially for a community that has been so disadvantaged for a very long time.
Thank you for that very graphic description. It sounds like a case of resource curse, which is something that you brought up in the video that you submitted for your application for the award, which you rightly won. And your description then of the magazines that you read of the town that you were, well, I guess, framed or was inspiration for some of your expectations for what foreign investment might bring, talks to the dependency that is at the root of the resource curse. And in those days, it was probably a mining town, and everything, the swimming pools included, were controlled by the mine. But nowadays, the opportunities for jobs is less as companies become more automated. Skilled workers come from overseas. How do you benefit from this when those jobs aren't there? What do you expect from the mining companies or the government in terms of development within the town?
That's a very, very important question. I think number one, mining companies should be able to plow back into the communities they are operating in. It is said that in Zimbabwe we do not have a corporate social responsibility legislation or an instrument that legislates, governs, corporate social responsibility, because it's something that we have also been advocating for. We have seen that maybe our advocacy might be paying off, because the new proposed Mines and Minerals Bill that is currently in the process, that is going to be an act of parliament, he has got some sections that speak into corporate social responsibility, although not in the way that would have liked to see them being framed, because we strongly believe that companies must have a certain percentage of their profits that they plow back into the community areas. Number two, we expect these companies to ensure that they rehabilitate the environment, and they also operate within responsible mining standards that have been prescribed both nationally, regionally, and internationally. There are so many instruments that have been developed over the years that really try to shape how mining companies can operate in a more responsible way, ensuring that the environmental harm is minimal, the health harm to the community is also minimal. So those are some of the expectations that we have as a community, and of course, rehabilitation of public infrastructure, most of which is destroyed by their existence in these communities. We're talking about roads and other public infrastructure that they can simply repair and ensure that they are in a good state. But above that, we also expect locals to be involved in the entire mineral value chain, not just in employment, but in the value chain itself. We expect, companies to try and work with local innovators, and of course, we expect them to, to share some of their technologies. There's been a talk of technology transfer. We expect to see that happening, and also the reskilling of the already existing skilled workforce, to ensure that the workforce is also not left out, because right now mining is at a critical stage, because we are also seeing talks around just transition. At the core of just transition conversations is the transitioning of the workforce. We cannot transition the economy alone. We also need to transition the workforce as well, to ensure that the workforce is able to continue.
You made a good point there about just transition. Of course, just transition, or transition in Western Europe and the USA, Northern Hemisphere, is more about transitioning away from hydrocarbons and fuels like coal, or coal in particular. And you also mentioned that mining is now at a critical stage, and just spinning off that term, critical minerals. Do you believe that for Zimbabwe, coal is a critical minerals? We talk about critical minerals a lot as what is needed for the energy transition, but so for Zimbabwe, where there is a dependency on coal for energy generation, and also a need for mining to develop more jobs and opportunities for a growing population, should Zimbabwe consider coal to be critical?
I personally believe that the term critical can mean different things depending on context. Internationally, I've been involved in climate activism myself, and such terms do really come up in most of our engagements. I've been to COP, I've followed engagements in negotiations around the Just Energy Transition Work Program, the Just Transition Work Program of the UNFCCC. Critical minerals get mentioned a lot, but I believe that the term can carry different meanings. internationally, when we talk about critical minerals, we are necessarily talking about minerals that are essential for high-tech industries or green energy transition. These are minerals like your lithium, your cobalt, and other rare earths, which are also present in Africa, and some are also present in Zimbabwe. So coal doesn't really fit that definition of a critical mineral. In fact, coal is often seen as a problem mineral in the context of climate change. So it's more of the problematic mineral that needs to be phased out. But however, from Zimbabwe's domestic policy standpoint, coal has always been critical, or has always been considered critical for our energy needs and our economy. Our government still regards coal as strategically important, and in our Mines and Minerals Bill, our new legislation that is going to govern mines and mineral resources, coal is central. In plain terms, without coal, Zimbabwe's lights would go off, at least with the current infrastructure that we have right now. So without coal, there's no energy in Zimbabwe, because most of our energy comes from thermal powered power stations. So that makes coal critical in the sense of Zimbabwe. The former mining minister was on record saying that coal is going to be central in driving our 12 billion mining industry, which is part of our blueprint in Zimbabwe. And he explicitly said that coal is expected to be contributing about 1 billion of that 12 billion US dollar mining industry. But from a personal perspective, I think that in as much as coal it might be critical to Zimbabwe today, this also paints a very troubling future for our nation, particularly for us young people who are the future of this nation, because the trajectory at which the world is moving in clearly shows that in not so many years, coal would have to be phased out, to embrace, the new way of living, to embrace the transitioning, especially for communities like Hwange, where I currently stay, where everything, the entire economy of this town is anchored on coal. So those are some of the conversations that we have been having as young people. We're looking into other clean coal technologies. We're looking into the cracking of coal to produce hydrogen. And I think, interestingly, Zimbabwe has got also deposits of lithium, which I believe that we should also be paying more attention to that. So, yeah, I think the term critical raises a lot of conversations, because we also find ourselves asking questions like, critical for who? And how can we be part of these conversations as young people?
Yeah, the dilemma around coal and energy production really gets to the heart of sustainable development, I think, which is trade-offs and how we manage those trade-offs and reduce the trade-offs. And there's a dependency on coal in Hwange and in Zimbabwe generally, which I think emphasizes even more the imperative to ensure that the wealth that generates is distributed appropriately and reinvested into the communities and the economy and into renewable energy. I'd like to turn now to and I was very taken by the comment that you made in your opening remarks around evidence, science, and the power that you can use to advocate for your communities. Tell us a little bit about how you use that and how far you've been able to take the evidence that you've generated to address or alter, influence policymakers. And, I'm thinking here that evidence is important because it implies a kind of a factual evidence base. But in the world now, what were truisms don't seem to be anymore. And things like fake news make us doubt some of the evidence that we see in front of us. So enlighten us about how you're going around generating the evidence and using the data and influencing policy.
Thank you so much. I think evidence or data is very, very, very important in our struggle, because it turns our lived realities, our lived experiences into undeniable facts that policymakers and companies can't really easily ignore. Coming from a community perspective, we can protest, we can tell stories, in as much as those stories might be powerful. But if we cannot back them up with hard evidence collected in proven scientific methods or empirical methods, it becomes harder for us to effect any change. I think, like I said earlier on, we've tried, I've seen a lot of activism, around coal mining, activism around pollution, and most of it didn't really yield any results, mostly because it could be dismissed. It could be easily dismissed because it was not backed by evidence, which really led to myself and other young people and other, activists in Hwange getting really involved in finding ways we can gather data within our communities to ensure that we don't just tell our stories, but we can also back them up using data that one cannot really deny. At times it becomes costly, and most of us, particularly if you are coming from a community-based organization point of view, you don't really have a huge budget for you to carry out empirical studies, because it costs a lot of money, especially if you are talking about studies that involve maybe testing of soil samples, testing of water samples, deploying sensors to monitor air quality. That might cost a lot of money. So that has always been our struggle, because I remember at some point there was an outcry from a community that depends on one of the most polluted rivers in Hwange. That was back in the day. There's a river, it's called the CECAR River. It was on the news for a number of years, because communities were reporting stories of how the polluted water has affected their livelihoods, the polluted water has affected their livestock. But it became hard for us to advocate around that issue, because when we tried to push for advocates around that issue, the government produced their data. They just slapped data on our faces to say, you are saying that the river is polluted, but we have carried out our own, water quality testing, and these are the results. And there was no way we could argue with the results without providing maybe counter results, counter data. So that conversation was just shut down like that, but everyone could see that the water is polluted. The villagers were attesting to that, but there was nothing that we could do as advocates, as activists. So that really showed that without data, we cannot really progress any conversation. When I traveled to the United States on a fellowship, I was privileged enough to be exposed to how we can leverage on remote sensing as a cheaper alternative to gather data and present and tell our stories better. That program really helped how I see things. But not only does data serve in us pursuing advocacy from that standpoint, it also informs us. And also, because I want to go to your point on disinformation and misinformation, there was a cry about mining that was happening within the Hwange National Park. Someone just reported, you know what, guys, as you're sitting there, there's mining that is happening in the Hwange National Park, and that has been a major driver of wildlife coming or encroaching into residential areas, particularly elephants. So we just ran with that story without ourselves having to verify it. And then again, the government and the mine itself produced maps that showed that they were not mining in the Hwange National Park, and that really discredited the critical mass. We're seen as people who are just trying to, we're just trying to derail mining activities. We're seen as sponsored agents that are spreading lies. And that really, hit the movement really hard, to an extent that everything that we said after that could not really be taken seriously. So that was also an important push factor for me to say, from now on, we cannot just, share stories without having to back them up with data, which is why when we're advocating for mining in the Hwange National Park in 2024, when we're writing the petition, we're making sure that the petition is grounded in facts. We did the satellite imagery, we identified the area, we're ensuring that we are providing our own alternative maps that show that the mining is actually encroaching into a protected area, which is why even the Mining Affairs Board in Zimbabwe had to listen to us, and that project was stalled. So that really proves that data can be a critical tool in driving advocacy. So over the years, we've been trying to sharpen our skills. We've also been trying to explore other ways we can rely on other low-cost research methodologies that can help us tell our stories better. We are currently working towards deploying an application that combines a basic camera of a cell phone and satellite imagery to monitor water quality, because that has been a lacking link in our advocacy. In terms of air quality, land degradation, we've produced reports that have been taken seriously. Our air quality report really sparked a conversation around the amendment of the Pneumoconiosis Act, which I can say right now that the Pneumoconiosis Act was repealed. The 1997 Pneumoconiosis Act has been repealed and is being reintegrated into another Act of Parliament that we think that most probably our work, particularly our data, has been able to really influence that policy conversation. So we are now working towards influencing such policy conversations or such critical conversations around also water quality monitoring. So yeah, data has really been critical. And one thing that we also do, lastly, as I wrap up on this one thing that we really do is to ensure that we're really transparent on the methodologies that we use, because we want everyone to be able to see where we are coming from, that we didn't just arrive at some result that we just pulled out of some magic bag, but these are really credible methodologies, proven scientific methodologies that anyone can peer review, and also ascertain that our results or our data contains a high degree of accuracy.
That's great to hear those success stories and evidence of the importance of evidence, importance of data. But even if we do have this data, and you're able to get and to publicize it, it seems to me that people can still counter that with their own data and analysis. And, going to the theme of the Indaba this year is Stronger Together, Progress Through Partnerships. Do you feel that in this endeavor to gather the data and present it appropriately, that you would benefit from having partnerships, people who can endorse, can augment the data, can back it up substantially so that you can be stronger?
Absolutely. So previously, before I founded the Center for Environmental and Corporate Accountability Research, I was part of another institution. And one lesson that I drew from that was that confrontational advocacy does not yield results. Because if you confront someone in authority, they can choose not to listen to you, and there's nothing that you can do apart from continuing making noise. So when I founded my organization, it was really premised on having partnerships and working relationships with those in government. For example, our air quality report, as damning as it was, we managed to engage the Environmental Management Agency in Zimbabwe, our local office. We had an engagement with them, and we managed to also compare, because they also conduct these studies as well, especially on air quality. They conduct their own studies that they might also sometimes choose not to share with the public based on their internal policies. But we managed to compare our data to see that our data was actually not so far from what they also gathered, and they also managed to sort of endorse. We have had them in our meetings, we have had them in our different forums. We make it a point that we cannot have a conversation without having those in authority being in that table. But we have managed to do this only at a local level. So we've managed to build a really healthy relationship, because we got to understand, or I got to understand that if you confront someone, they get into a defensive mode. And usually, if someone in authority is in a defensive mode, the one who loses is the community member or the community itself. But if you engage, if you are showing that you are not coming to confront, this is not a witch hunt, but you are coming to also engage, have a healthy working relationship, that also helps. And I strongly believe that much of the success that we have enjoyed has always been due to the fact that our local environmental management agency office has got a healthy working relationship with us. Our local authority has got a healthy working relationship with us, both at a personal level, at an institutional level. So they really value the information that we also bring to the table, and sometimes they escalate it further, and they also endorse it, making it really carry some weight in the corridors of power. So partnerships are really important. And we cannot be stronger unless we are working together. Our cry for inclusivity must not only be centered on us being included in discussions that matter, but also should also be seen in us showing the willingness to engage, not to confront. So those are some of the lessons that I've had over the years.
That's great. And very sadly, I think I'm going to have to bring the conversation to an end. But you've given me, and I'm sure our listeners, a lot to think about from your inspirational stories and your collaborative approach to making things better for mining communities. And I hope that this award will help you meet and create more partnerships in Cape Town at the Indaba, the Mining Indaba conference in February. So it leaves me really just to thank you once again. Thank our speaker, Nkosi Sibanda, for joining us today. And to our listeners, please check out the rest of this special series of Mining Indaba podcasts on the TDI Sustainability Suits and Boots podcast channel. I look forward to seeing you all at the event in February, where you can hear more from Nkosi and other Community Voices 2026 winners. I'm Ashton Carter, and thank you for listening.